I did not believe that this should be a security matter. Some of it, sure. But just the concept that there's definite proof. We even have articles from another world, another system. You just can't not tell everyone.
So hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of the Bob Lazar story, and in this segment we're going to get into his work at S2. So let's get into the video.
Alright, so at what point, describe the evolution of your knowledge here, that you realize that this thing that you're working on came out of a flying saucer?
Well, of course I know that technology doesn't exist at all.
Why?
Well, it doesn't. Take my word for it. It's just technology that doesn't exist yet. You're talking about that science doesn't even know what gravity is, much less how to produce it or control it. And here is a device that's producing it and controlling it and using it as propulsion. So
Now the thing I think is interesting, in part 1 we saw who was paying Bob Lazar, and that was the Air Force. Now there's an article from I think it was the 40s, where they actually captured a flying saucer in Roswell, New Mexico. It was reported all over the world, but then the Air Force Army got involved and then tried to palm it off as a weather balloon. Now, if this was a weather balloon, why did the Army and Air Force get involved to try and clear a weather balloon up? It just does not make any sense whatsoever. Also, the residents of Roswell found fragments. The craft was pretty much still intact, but they found fragments of the craft that had came off, and how they described them was they were like very thin pieces of metal, just very, very thin, and you could crumple them up in your hand like aluminium. But then when you released your hand and let this metal material unfold, it didn't have any creases and it folded up like it was as smooth as glass. They had never seen anything like it. Well, of course, the Army and the Air Force went round all the residents of Roswell and made them sign NDAs, and in some cases threatened them, told them that if they ever spoke about this, they would be killed. So was one of these crafts that Bob was working on the Roswell craft? It's just food for thought. So to make Bob's story more believable, they decided to give him polygraph tests. When his story first came out, they had a police polygraph examiner give him tests, and he did it 4 times, and each time he passed it. But the people who were making this documentary, they wanted to do their own polygraph test. So I'm going to show you that here.
Feel better for myself. So I said, hey, would you be willing to undergo a polygraph test? He did not hesitate. He said yes. 4 different tests on 4 different areas of Bob's claims. And he said afterward, there is no attempt to deceive at all. He's telling what he believes to be the truth. I have asked the question many times over the years, how did Bob Lazar know this stuff if he wasn't there? He knew there was a place called S4. I had called Nellis Air Force Base Public Information Office. They confirmed for me there really was a place called S4. Now, there's no news story prior to Bob Lazar about any place called S4. He knew about it. He also knew that EG&G had arranged to hire personnel, that if you were going to get a job out of Groom Lake, EG&G was the company that you would go through. He knew that there had been investigators at his home for the background check. You remember the guy's name. It was an odd name, Mike Thigpen. Now, how did he know? How did he know that Mike Thigpen works for a federal agency that does this stuff?
After 30 years, and this guy dodging you, I found Mike Thigpen. I found Thigpen.
That's amazing.
I couldn't believe it. He's on the East Coast. I called him. I've talked with him multiple times. You know, he won't go on camera because he doesn't want to kind of put a dark shadow upon the work that he did before. But personally, he conveyed to me that that was his job. That was exactly what he did in Las Vegas in 1989. And in fact, he remembers Bob Lazar.
The most important thing Bob knew is that they were flying something that looks exactly like a flying saucer over Papoose Lake. And they flew them on Wednesday nights. And he took people out there 3 weeks in a row and showed it to them. And at least once, maybe twice, they recorded it on video. That's real. How did Bob know that? There have been no stories about test flights of flying saucers at Papoose Lake. And by the way, that's where it was. It wasn't over Groom Lake. It was over Papoose Lake. We checked out so many details that Bob had told us that turned out to be true. The existence of S4, element 115, really did become an element years later, that Bob had been consulted by the lab which first synthesized man-made element 115. There was a whole long string of things that he knew that checked.
Now, before we get into the element 114, I want to show you videos of Bob describing, and he actually draws a picture describing what the reactor that he was working on. And it's absolutely fascinating.
This film was captured by a local news crew in
clip that I just
1978.
showed you,
Believers say
no
it's
one
proof
knew about
of UFO
S4
activity.
before Bob
The Pentagon has
uttered
confirmed a
those
strange and unexpected
words.
sign
Sorry,
captured by
I'm
Navy
still having
personnel
trouble
off the coast
talking,
of
guys.
California. The video shows
So
flying
no one knew about
pyramid-shaped
S4.
objects hovering
No
above
one
the
knew
USS
that they were
Russell
test
and another
flying
warship.
It was
objects over
leaked by
Papoose Lake,
filmmaker
not
Jeremy
Groom
Corbell.
Lake,
He's
Papoose
also
Lake.
shared 3
He knew
images from
about
the USS Omaha
he
showing
knew
an
too many
unknown
details for someone who was lying. I would say like he's either a psychic or he's telling the truth. There's also been, when he went on Joe Rogan, behavioural analysts watched that interview and they deemed that Bob was telling the truth. He didn't show any signs of deception whatsoever. So let's get into the reactor and let Bob explain what he was working on.
Surrounding this, in 3 equally spaced areas, are the amplifiers. So this is looking at it sideways, this is looking at it down from the top. And under these amplifiers, underneath, on the floor below, are the gravity emitters. So it's the reactor here, powering the gravity amplifiers. Gravity amplifiers output goes into the gravity emitters at the bottom, and the resulting gravity beam or anti-gravity wave can be pretty much put anywhere you want it to. There was another level up here. Now I had access and was permitted to view and look at the operation of this main level with the gravity amplifiers and the level below the gravity emitters. There is a level above which consisted of these 2 areas that I'm not all that familiar with. I assume these to be some sort of navigational engine. People call these large black rectangular areas on the top portholes. I believe they were some planar sensor array that just took in information from the surrounding area, whether it be patterns of stars or what have you. And there was their version of a computer or something to make determinations here that takes input from those sensors and then let the craft know how to orient itself and where it was in space. So that's what I assumed to be up there. I don't know for a fact. Again, that was not part of my job, and I was only led to believe that. The center antenna is really an extension of the reactor in the center, and that's a waveguide, which allows the emission of the gravity wave, which forms kind of a heart shape over the whole craft. That's how it creates its distortion. These gravity emitters can be swung all the way up to 180 degrees. And this allows the craft to essentially stand on two of them and hover, while this one swings up and creates a distortion in front of it, allowing the craft to slide forward. So that's how their low power mode, Omicron configuration operate. The Delta configuration uses all three, and unlike science fiction movies where you see flying saucers just flying along like that, they actually fly belly first. The craft flies along, leaves the atmosphere of the planet, it turns its belly to the destination, the three amplifiers focus in on the destination, and that's how it proceeds. So that's basically the operation of it and overall how things were laid out inside the craft.
This is an alien spacecraft.
Right, obviously.
Now, what I find interesting regarding the drawing that Bob did is that he explained that the UFO doesn't just lift off like you would expect a flying saucer to lift up into the sky and spin around and just head off onto orbit. He actually says that the way the amplifiers work, that they rotate so that the craft actually turns on its belly. So, and it flies that way. And then isn't it interesting that the videos that the Pentagon released is of a UFO doing exactly that? Now, the next part of the video I'm going to get into is this element that Bob supposedly took a piece from S4, and which has caused his properties to be raided multiple times. He has been under surveillance. I mean, this is 30 years ago, and this man is still under surveillance, and just up until recently was raided again while doing this documentary because they were talking about this element 115. They even took precautions to switch their phones off, be in a wooded area, but yeah, no, that didn't work. So let's go on to them speaking about this element.
Alright, so the only record of this is going to be on the audio on this one file, and then this video clip. I'm not going to cut it, I'm going to let it run.
Understood.
Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to encrypt it, and I'm going to put both of those two files into an encrypted thing to not be touched unless we decide it should be touched.
That's fine.
Okay, it'll be on 2 drives, but those 2 files will both be in an encrypted folder. So here's the deal. Did you ever get a piece of element 115 out of Los Alamos?
I don't know how much monitoring they do with me. I'm sure it's virtually none after all this time.
Hold on one second.
Thing.
Hold on 1 second. Let me. Do you have your phone on you?
Yes.
Let's at this point take our phone. Let me just throw them. Let me put them in the ground over there. I'll turn mine off.
I mean, maybe this has been kept from us for a good reason. A lot of people agreed to keep this secret. So, first of all, who am I to upset it? And second of all, who am I to outthink these guys? Maybe they went over all these scenarios already and they know how fucked up everything will be. So there's no guarantee that this revelation is going to make everything great. There's just as much chance it's going to make everything terrible, and I'll be to blame for that. They identified themselves as FBI, and they said, "You're Bob Lazar, right?" And then, one of them got on the radio saying, "Yeah, he's here." Apparently, they also had my house staked out, and they were deciding whether or not to go there. The conveyor belt of vehicles and agents and police did not stop. The whole thing was like a Twilight Zone episode. They came in and then they said, "There'll be a few other people coming here. Just got a couple questions to ask you." In a short time, the street filled up with vehicles and the building completely filled with agents. It was really something else.
Did they identify themselves initially as?
Yeah, it was FBI identified themselves. Then came in state police and a few other agencies. I don't remember who, but there were a lot. Awful lot. Standing room only in the building. It was crazy.
Yeah, they had like a forensic truck. They had a bunch of different agents. They gridded off the building. I mean, obviously they're looking for something.
Yeah. And what they said, they were looking for some paperwork, an old order from 2 years ago about a customer that ordered some potentially toxic material, which they could have called for. But this was certainly way over the top. I looked up to select the right key, and they were right beside me. It was quite surprising, considering you could see all around here, and there would generally have to be a vehicle or something somewhere. But I just pulled up, got out, picked the key, and then they started talking from behind me. I thought that was really strange. Of course, it got much stranger as the day went on.
What got stranger about it?
Well, just the sheer amount of people that came, agency after agency, and I mean, they had computer experts here going through, all the computer equipment we had here. They had people sectioning off the building, labeling it in cubic meters so they can search each one. What they were looking for was just an order form. So very strange.
So isn't it very strange that the day after Bob meets this reporter, his premises is raided by multiple government agencies, and they were able to read verbatim what they spoke about while in the woods. They're not looking for paperwork. But yeah, it doesn't take truckloads of agents and police, etc., just to look for one piece of paper. They could easily have got that by calling Bob's lab, because he does own a lab. So Bob seems to think, yeah, it's been 30 years, they're not still watching him. Clearly they are. So now I'm going to let Bob explain why this element 115 is so important to fly these craft. It seems to be fuel, and fuel for the reactor in the craft. As I said, it's not a physicist. I'm better off letting Bob explain it.
Element 115 was what we would call the fuel, what provided the power for the reactor to work.
What happens with gravity and 115?
Element 115 affects gravity. Element 115 produces its own gravitational energy. It had a very specific manufacturing technique. I don't really know how that information came to be. Its code name was LA-1000. LA-1000. That's what it was referred to, off-site. Its purpose was supposed to be, again, this is just a code and deception, was supposed to be an advanced armor. So it's an unusual material, so now we can take it to a national lab. This is LA-1000, classified material. It's a very advanced armor. That takes care of all weird questions. So, you immediately start operating on lies. This fuel is in the form of just a three-dimensional thin triangle, little rounded edges. It's somewhat copper in color, that reddish brownish. The way this is manufactured is really critical. It's not just cut out of a heavy sheet of material. A cylinder of this material is taken. This is machined into a cone. So this is, the outer part is shaved off using a lathe or something like that until you have a three-dimensional cone. Once you have the cone, it's sliced like this. And these slices become that. Now, even this starting piece, a solid cylinder, is not even a solid cylinder. It consists of many discs stacked up. And these are fused together to produce that. And all of these steps are necessary to produce a successful triangle that brings fuel. So actually, if you were to look at how this came to be, this would actually be pieces of all these discs that were cut at unusual angles. Now, apparently, if you don't do all this, that doesn't work. So, unfortunately, that's the extent of my knowledge on this. This makes no sense anywhere, but that's what it takes for it to operate. Now, with the alien technology that was present in the craft, it takes that basis, that extra gravitational energy in a small reactor, amplifies it through the equipment there, directs it through the waveguides and archways into the emitters, and allows it to propel the craft and manipulate the gravity wave for whatever use they want.
So what do you guys think? Do you think Bob Lazar is being truthful? Or do you think he's telling an elaborate hoax? How do you explain the information that he knew that wasn't public knowledge? That's just my question. How does he know so much? I tend to veer on the side of believing him just because behavioural and body language experts, polygraph machines, and all the information that he has told has all turned out to be true. Obviously, there is some holes in his story, but the government can wipe away your history if it sees you as a threat. But that's just my analysis. I would like to know what you guys think. So let me know in the comments. Do you believe Bob? Why? And if you don't, why? Well, until next time, thank you so much for watching. Bye.